Welcome to NFT Sundays, a weekly conversation around art and technology, brought to you by Deminti and the Museum of Crypto Art. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another special episode of NFT Sundays. I'm Colborn Bell with the Museum of Crypto Art, and I am joined by our guest today, esteemed artist, VR designer, developer, creator of Mad Worlds. We have Sam Rolfes with us.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thanks so much for joining. Yeah, real pleasure. So we're going to start where we always start. You know, we'd just love to hear anything you'd like to share about yourself and perhaps any sort of ways, means, or affiliation with the NFT space.
Sure. Well, as some background, well, actually speaking literally to background, if y'all hear any like screaming in the background, I'm at a virtual production space in Gowanus in Brooklyn called Zero Space, which is a place that we've started partnering with. They do like XR stuff. They do, big LED walls. They have a new venue. And we are the first artist team to do their artist residency, and we're helping kind of define what that looks like and what that kind of partnership between like an artistic R&D experimental art practice looks like in a settled in like in a commercial space, which is one that I feel fairly conversant in, because up until recently, that's been mostly how we've made our art. It's been through music videos. It's been through stage performances, which, we typically pick fairly artistic ones or left of center ones or whatever, but they're still within a commercial context. So anyway, we do all that kind of stuff. We do stage performance, motion capture, VR, puppetry, did things like Lady Gaga's remix album cover, stuff like that, sculpture. And to kick it off with with that first prompt of like how are we related to like Web3 or crypto space? I mean, we started, I guess, a dialogue with it relatively early, like early relative to the current like wave, like what was that, like 2020 or something like that. Our longtime like creative producer Kara Kittle, who's over at Other Internet, clued us in on things, and I've been friends with, for example, Matt Dryhurst and Holly Herndon, Josh Citarella, and the New Models people, who that was the first. No, actually, no, that was not the first one we did. That was the most recent like NFT thing that I've participated in. It wasn't really mine. It was me more doing helping out on the design work and the kind of concepting to help raise money for their venture, which I can kind of talk about later, but called Channel. But prior to that, we've been in the process of putting together a game, which has now kind of become the short film stage thing. I think it still will end up being a game, but the back end of it was intended to have a Web3 basis, one which would basically pay out involved community people depending on their participation and be an opt-in thing. It was my intention to bring it in a way that I felt was meaningful and helpful to the format and it didn't distract from the work itself. So and then Andy, my brother Andy, who I run the studio with, Team Rolfes, he's been minting stuff pretty consistently, and he has more of a consistent output in terms of like and is part of Refraction DAO and with our commercial producer Dina Chang, who helped set up Refraction DAO. They're very active in that space. I've been less so, more watching it from the shadows, coming in when I feel it's appropriate.
It's always nice to have somebody close to you to take those first steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Learn those lessons. I've read a lot. Obviously, kind of NFTs were very much a market born of coronavirus, and people, going back indoors, being on their computers, probably feeling a lot of the, I think, emotion that you work with primarily, which perhaps could be called as anxiety. So I'm just curious from your standpoint, at a time when generally we would have expected the VR medium to flourish, what you were seeing like happen from a corporate side, and perhaps like why you think or you don't think that maybe NFTs might have helped fill a gap for people.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that is one thing that was remarkable and frustrating to me during the initial year and a half or so of the pandemic was, we had been putting together these live stream interactive shows, these live 3D animations that had audience input that people could vote. It was like it's like Twitch plays Pokemon, but for a whole 3D like drama basically. And for example, one was supposed to be an official show was like a huge official show for Twitch. One was it was a pilot for Adult Swim, because Adult Swim had these very, very well built out live stream studios that they were starting to work with. In each case, the case with Twitch, it was Amazon. The case with Adult Swim, it was AT&T. The parent company came in, decided that they were redundant, and then fired the entire team. And then so ended their creative live stream venture. And I feel like similar things happen. It happens even more prematurely with VR, because an executive of these parents, as these corporations get more and more consolidated, the execs that are like 500 levels high, like above wherever this ostensible art or whatever content is being created, has no understanding of the possibilities or the implications. They're completely removed from that context. So yeah, I mean, VR, I guess, in a way, VR kind of can keep doing its thing in the shadows, because it's like it's always relied on VC money, and it's always been this kind of like moonshot thing. I will say that, I mean, Half-Life Alyx came out on VR during that time, and that was like a big pandemic thing for me. But yeah, I don't know. But it is, my point being that like a lot of what you would expect in terms of new novel formats that are like perfectly placed for the times we live in, not going forward or not expanding in the way that you would expect, is oftentimes in my experience just a result of these gigantic megacorps not recognizing that and wanting to fall back on core competencies or whatever, even though their profits are crazy and they could stand to lose a little money. And so crypto and NFT market and things like that not require having relatively less startup costs. Like you don't need, a lot of my interest in that world is one of creating your own platforms, creating your own networks, detaching from platform capitalism. Now, granted, depending on what it looks like, you could just end up creating your own platform capitalism for yourself. But it makes sense to me that those would be more successful more quickly, because there's the money and the people who were funding it and the people who are participating in it largely were the same people. So you didn't really have to pitch it to too many people. You just had to pitch to like one guy, and then we're off to the races. Whereas with more legacy media, you have to go through years of trying to get it to convince one dude at the top to let this thing go through. So anyway, that's kind of how I've been tracking media markets for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think what we've seen is just an immediate bootstrapping of capital, an immediate like bootstrapping of community with future promises. That is kind of then left into like the full control and creative direction of the artists. We have not seen really anything on the level that kind of you create as far as world building. So for me, it's like these very tiny Lego blocks of an unproven and like promised future. So I can see a lot of like the reservations and hangups, because I think the way you play is on a level that's much deeper and more experienced than where most people are coming from.
Yeah, and I on face value, I like the inclination of all these different projects to like have lore and have a Discord and have all these things that have become like cliches in that world. But like, because people are looking at them as just like boxes to be checked, and there's no critical, I mean, honestly, there's just no critical discourse layer other than just like quote tweeting on Twitter or whatever to like be like, this stuff sucks. And also that honestly, in a lot of cases, the quality of the thing has very little to do. Now, you could say this about the traditional art world, but like the quality of the thing has very little to do with its value or its success as a project. But I do get like, I think it does the whole, format a disservice by all these like, by all these different projects having this kind of like, slapped on lore, and then things that are just like create the illusion of more substance. And that, yeah. And not following through.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like increasingly derivative, and then people slowly abandon the projects, and it's just like who is left holding the bag. Yeah, I mean, but in some instances, it's nice when the creator gets paid. Although then, of course, they're beholden to what has been affectionately termed the community of apes. The people that are in there for no other reason than just to speculate wildly. Let's take it in and shift gears. I'm super fascinated by one, probably your vision for, this broad brush term, the metaverse, what you think these spaces offer people, and then from there maybe we can start to get into how we should be dialoguing with these spaces at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, my view. I mean, I am working. We're playing with metaverse tropes and stuff as much as there are any right now in our work, kind of from like a critical parody angle. But I mean, the way that I view it, really, outside of just like a thing to be a cultural reference point that I can just use to make our art, otherwise, is that it's just the normal expansion of capital into new markets, because every other market has been has been used up, has been completely consolidated, and that the idea that like basically in short, the colonization of online organic communities. So like these communities have existed online forever, even before VR chat, just like people customizing things, appropriating IP and mixing and matching and creating their own stories and their own lore and all these different things, which is incredibly powerful. And companies see that. They see not only is it powerful and is impactful, but that is lost profits on their end. Their people are using their IP, and here comes this new technology that lets you put like directly link things to an owner. So that my most cynical take is that for all the all the horizontalist cooperatively owned things that the technology allows that interest me, it also really gives corporations a new tool to completely capture ownership over everything, and just like and make the public square, the former kind of public square of fan fiction, just another Fortnite level. And so you have to pass through, it's just another platform capitalism thing where the conversation is happening on their platforms using their IP to their characters that you build. And yeah, you can do everything you want, but it's within the bounds that they set. So yeah, my conception of like what the metaverse represents in that capacity is just cynical corporate consolidation. In terms of like aesthetics and stuff, it does at least make the public more aware of like VR stuff and avatars and things that we have been working with artistically. So it's good for me making like art about it, but on a social level, it's been mixed at best.
I'll say, as somebody who spends most of their time like home alone exploring this technology very independently, I just came back from a week in Los Angeles spending time with Hollywood, trying to get their tentacles around this, Andreessen Horowitz tapping major studios to again try and control IP and find talents to represent in ways to, and it's just fascinating because what we started with was something entirely different, and what it grew to become, of course, is very disheartening as everything increasingly gets pulled more mainstream to the center, sterilized. And I feel from you and your work just like the speed and the responsiveness and the invitation to bring people into probably antithetical places to what perhaps a meta is producing. So I'm just, what wins? Does the speed of artist creativity and this invitation, is this where you hope people will go to continue to challenge themselves, or has it just become so controlled and owned that everything just kind of floats to the top again?
Yeah, I mean, it's also a question of it's the incentive structures of these platforms. When like there is no like I wouldn't have my work hosted on Instagram if I had any other option. Like it is we sorry. We imagine that there's unlimited potential, or there's always alternatives to go off the grid, so called, like as it were, from like Facebook or whatever. But as these become the only option available to us, it's maybe not even as much as like the speed of art being created to try and subvert. It's that the platforms, the places that they have to live to be able to reach anybody, are forced into such a specific value structure to be successful that like nobody can create. If you were trying to create anything counter to that or subversive of the trends, it just won't exist.
Could you explain to me just like how you create your art, the technical aspect of this, and perhaps the intent of the worlds that you build?
The way we build stuff is very real. It's very improvisational. It's very painterly. We come from a painting background. all of our technical tool, all of our tech tools, our virtual tools were selected because I like to respond to things in the moment. So like the reason why we do live motion capture with live VR and VR puppetry is kind of like an expressiveness and a in the moment response to stimuli or like how the scene's going. It's like being a DJ or somebody with an audience, and that happens whether we're on stage or if we're just in the studio making a music video. And the way in which we go about it varies obviously depending on what it is. A stage show is going to be different than a music video. They're using the same tools but they're in different contexts. And I have to consider different things dynamically obviously with like a music video versus something else versus like a sketch, like one of the kind of like format parody sketches I do. But right now we're starting up the first projects in like 5 or 6 years that are entirely us. And it's like it started from the game. And again, the game that we've been working on is forming the kind of world that this being built off of. But it's with the kind of infamous poet troll, internet troll, Jacob Bakilla, who has had many, well-known internet aliases and stuff, but he's co-writing it with me. And it's going to end up being a potentially a short film, but it's definitely going to be a stage show that's debuting in Australia in June with Lil Mariko. And the way we go about that is significantly more holistic. Where we're not just doing world building to the extent that like we want to flesh out the world enough that like it will carry a song for 5 minutes, but it's like using all these performative real time tools. How do you carry over the dramaturgy of the mechanics of MoCap and like what the language of MoCap and how it relates to an interactive environment, carrying that into now our own story has been very freeing. So that's been for that. Normally we just jump in, sculpt characters, sculpt the environment in VR, get in there, VR puppet stuff, do everything like 3 or 4 weeks. This has been like 2 or 3 months of me just making storyboards and charts and mood boards and writing and like a lot of charts and stuff. So but once we actually dig in, you can't really fully understand a scene or like the dramatic capabilities of a character until you like play around with it. And so there's always going to be a little bit of leeway. So we we jump into a scene, we kind of know where it's going to go, we know some of the dialogue, but then we kind of are still riffing in the moment because the way that the characters act and move once you actually get them in a virtual space gives them so much. You find a lot of unexpected things that end up being the best part of the performance or video or show or whatever. So yeah, it's all very responsive.
I mean, I'm just obsessed with VR as a medium to induce kind of empathy. That direct shot into the eyes, I think is, some of the most powerful, and I think it has the ability to like pull people into something that is outside, like hunched over in the screen, in the computer. So I'm just obsessed with the medium and the form. But I'm also super interested in your use of VR puppetry. Can you just tell me how this works? And everything I've seen is just like so powerful, so frenetic. Perhaps what are you trying to like elicit by doing this?
I mean, oftentimes, yeah. I mean, a lot of times it is something is finding a bit of some like the human touch in a virtual space, which relies on it. You can kind of get that when you keyframe something. You spend a lot of work, but like the way that a VR puppet moves physically in space, because you're moving your hand, no matter how well you're simulating it, if you're like, it's not going to have the same like impromptu kind of like human touch as if you're actually humanly touching it. So that's one reason why so much of our stuff arises out of like bodily tools or whatever. And oftentimes I default tonally on things that are manic or stressed, like gig economy stuff that just as like a creative. I mean, we run our company, but we are functionally creative freelancers. Emotions that one feels with, just living under the boot of platform capital. But yeah, I mean, and with a music video, oftentimes it's how do you build in the performative aspect, whatever it is, whether it's like the way that a character moves relates to the position of the sun in the sky or whatever. How do you build that into the song and have that be like an accompaniment functionally to? It's almost as like you're duetting with the song, but like how am I making this character fly or move or maybe the camera is the thing that is being choreographed. How am I doing virtual choreography to help, accentuate or otherwise augment the source material. But again, now that we're doing more of our own stuff, that's it's so much more open creatively, and that's where we'll really be exploring a lot with this upcoming film or show or whatever we're working on right now.
And the conversation with the real world, I imagine this is really meant to be, a mirror. It is probably mirroring and accentuating a lot of perhaps like unrealized subconscious emotions in the way that capital is shifting society, and meant to perhaps be, probably just an American reflection on this sort of control system.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, yeah, I mean, it is the best I can do oftentimes is just reflecting the moment that we're in. I don't have any, as much as I try and build in, my like lefty ideals into the dialogue and stuff like that. I don't really consider art to be something that can change society. I think that oftentimes it can just maybe heighten it or reflect it and maybe cause somebody to think about something in a slightly different way that may then become a catalyst to something. But yeah, oftentimes it's just reflecting where I and the people in my world and my friends are kind of like at. And I have fallen in the trap of, I mean, speaking of the value requirements of platforms, like they value in the moment responses to events, like, in the like trend, riffing on something that just happened 5 seconds ago, and that does better. But historically, I don't think work lasts nearly as long. And like, it lasts for that 5 seconds and it might do well for that 5 seconds, but you look back on it and it doesn't hit in the same way. So I'm also trying to pull back on that element. It like represent the moment we're in, but not do so Twitter like.
And I think the great shame, of course, is that in order to access these experiences, it is incredibly capital intensive for people, right? So you're kind of just, you're at least I find myself a lot of the time speaking to the people and showing them the experiences that are generally not the target audience that I want.
Sure.
Yeah, so I see, I guess what Meta has done with Oculus and them trying to like drive down the cost and bringing that into people's homes. But in that instance, again, the people become the product, in the way they move their eyes and the things that they're looking at. This is all data that's being captured and recorded. So I, I worry about this more dystopian narrative, and I'm kind of curious if you do as well.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, worrying as much as I'm kind of like, I'm just kind of I've been doomered out to the point that I'm kind of just trying to reflect the moment. I've kind of like, I think I will recover and feel some sort of agency, but really all my agency right now is to just reflect it as genuinely as possible and have some fun with it, and then see if my friends and I can try and try and make our own way a little bit. Our some of these other like platform building ventures, like Web3 based ventures, things that are more decentralized, is that an option? And that those are things that make me excited about potential. Just finding places to make our work and connect with people. But I know what you mean. Like everything we've done as like avant-garde or whatever as it is still positioned. Like it's made with the consideration of a generalized audience, and it has to hit certain things aesthetically and whatever. And I've been over the last few years even more intentionally playing with that, trying to understand the cultural stepping stones for somebody to understand my work better, because I don't want to just talk to the same like Berlin lefty niche underground club people. Like I will continue hanging out and talking with those people, but I would like it to expand beyond that. And to do so, that conversation, people have to know what you're talking about to an extent, or at least have a few stepping stones to start getting there. Whereas, the world that I come from, everybody kind of gets it. And so I can just kind of riff and do my thing. Everybody kind of understands the language. So, that's also been part of the conversation, is like wanting to find a broader audience and trying to understand how to do something meaningful that's just not just trippy. Because, things can be flattened to abstraction very easily when they don't understand things.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I come from finance, social impact background. I initially thought crypto was going to be that hack where we could remove like the just capital control around ideas that places like Silicon Valley had, these PE firms, like, and shift it, and recognizing that there is like creative genius, there are new ideas all over the world, and as like a fluid movement of capital on kind of a, I don't know, GoFundMe type thing where everybody's chipping in, a little bit to make it happen. And you increasingly see the means co-opted. And for NFTs, my big goal incentive was to just facilitate crypto adoption among more creative people, because I believed in it, but now again I see kind of like the means co-opted, and I think there's only like a few chances in life where you really get to have one of those like big hacks of society. And something I'm really trying to reconcile is, how do we have these conversations to express these values, to like go back to the origins of this. I'm perhaps like an artist with money, which is very different, and I think it makes me grateful for visual artists.
Yeah, that adoption question. It's also it. I think I'm of the mind that certain moments like this are when you need to when one has to strike, because the status quo is ever so slightly misaligned, so you can sneak in here or there. A lot of times it strikes me that it ends up having to be done with to your point, like a community's institutional building, because the institutions are so stacked in favor of the current system that if you have any intention of changing it, even if everybody's on the same page with like that we need to change it, you have to the boring and bureaucratic infrastructural work of just like setting that up, introducing people to it, and then getting people active in a way that is not just immediately beneficial. Like it's working towards a future in tandem with everybody. Now, to get to that point is not just, you can't just offer them a cool opportunity. People have to like trust that that's actually possible. And that's also another moment we're in, where like that's kind of going counter to all the possibilities, is that like the possibilities have been so foreclosed on everybody that the social fabric of like trust that like we're building building something together is even possible is at a all-time low. I at least I feel personally. So like that's also another thing that you have to, that we're dealing with, is that just like the general distrust of people for organization, I guess.
Everything. I mean, I think there was like, since maybe early 2000s, continuing erosion in, trust of governments, trust of institutions. But then COVID hit, and then we lost trust in each other, because we were mandated to stay away, and we, were told not to go outside, interact, and, we found communities and built stuff online. But if we can't like bring and translate those lessons back into the real world, well, what have we really done?
I mean, I'd also say that like that, the process of turning everybody in society into an individual consumer monad has been, that's been the process since the 70s or something like that. So this is all, part of it is that like none of this stuff is all, like the tools are novel and like how it looks is novel, but the plan is all, it just, individual consumer choice being the beginning and end, and the removal of any sort of social, certainly like union type bonds or something like that has been, that's not a new thing. That's not specific to the metaverse or to Web3 or to any of this stuff.
I'm very much of like a dual mind, that we exist in this incredible time where both, of course, like technology is empowering individuals to have the same size and scale and scope as, like I have the same tools as a hedge fund in the 1990s, right? As an individual, right? I can move capital. I can, I can access technology. I have a trove of information kind of at my thing, but also so do the corporations. So are we moving towards, like, in your opinion, I get doom and gloom, but is it tech dystopia, or do we have the promise of some sort of like tech utopia?
I don't think that personally. I'm never a believer that the tech itself is the emancipatory factor. Like I completely reject any tech utopianism or technocratic solutions, because usually they are just new shiny band-aids for non-systemic change. I look at Web3 broadly as an agnostic tool that can be used for whichever, and of course it's taking a speculative hyper-capitalist form, because that is the vessel that it is filling socially. and it has the potential to do other things, but then we have to, like, that has to exist on like a social base of people actually being interested in a more horizontalist thing. And like some people are, but at a scale that there haven't been, that just there has to be an additional social movement. And that's one thing that ends up being frustrating, I feel like, as artists, is that a certain type of society, I think American media or like society consumption kind of looks at art and content as what will change the world. Like if we make the perfect Disney movie, somehow everybody's going to be moral and things will go better and we'll be nice to each other. When that's absolutely not the case. I mean, obviously that's in the interest of the content, how like the studios to make that seem like that's the case. So it's like, oh, I have to consume this, so I'm like taking my communion as like a good liberal, citizen. But I think that the technology is essential to a certain extent for making better a utopian thing happen, and giving people more access to whatever, giving them tools for whatever. But the base issue, the alienation from their lives and their labor and their actual control over the world around them, that it just requires just like boots on the ground, just like a social movement.
I feel the gutting of like the American community, the American middle class, like the social fabric that tied us together. We have, I'm obsessed with the idea of the third space, being that there is home and there is work and there is generally a third place where people kind of congregated. Like I am here in, a 19th century church that I've repurposed to be just like a place of congregation for artists, programmers, hackers, developers, people that are really trying to, I don't know, do anything, but at least like let the magic flow. So I'm curious, what are the types of spaces, what are the types of experiences that you think people need to be having, and the types of events that we can be hosting to restitch this?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I will say, I mean, my friend Z, and along with Zach Fox and some other comedians they've been building this like leftist co-op called Jaded, and they're working on building like this program for doing. They just had an event recently that was kind of like half panel, half comedy show or something like that. So like they're attempting this, and I'm helping them here and there. They could really speak to this honestly significantly better than me because they have history with socialist organizations and like actually what does it take to get people to come to a meeting and like or like actually do stuff that's not just like going out and partying. I certainly think that I mean it's hard for me to say. I will say that like coming from like the nightlife world, being somebody who like DJs but also does music and music videos and all sorts of stuff, the fact that the congregation point for seemingly a lot of people across all ages it has to be in places where you're boozed up, and there's not many other spaces. It's entirely just like music shows are often just a function of just like alcohol sales to support it. That seems like there more opportunities for genuine social connection could. I mean, there's something obviously. I'm not going to say anything too bad about the club because I feel like clubs are magical spaces, but I don't know if they can capture the entirety of human connection. That there might be better. It might be good to have other alternatives. Yeah.
I've spent a fair amount of time in club spaces. I think the alcohol element really like provides mostly escapism, right? It's not introspective, it's not reflective. You don't build or connect, although the music is bonding, and there are bonding moments, and I've had probably some of the most incredible experiences there. So maybe I'm double-edged sword on that one.
It serves a purpose, but but it's as with anything, it's not going to do everything. And again, it's no fix for atomized social bonds. I mean, really, it's more of an issue that like now we're all we at least had for better or worse workspaces to go to. Not that I did. I mean, freelancers and people already were at cafes and stuff, but like there was at least another place. Now there's even more atomization, and like you're just you're in your pod, you get your content, you tweet to other people. Like there is the pretense of social interaction, but like it's not anything that anybody can build a social movement on, because again, these are all mediated by companies that have interests completely against whatever you would be trying to do. So like, how do you build a movement when all discourse and all conversation online happens through these companies who have vested interest in only a certain type of content and discourse happening? It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. Like it was so I was a very antisocial person, like did not exist on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, intentionally, right? But
Mhm.
in starting this museum project, it forced me to be on Twitter. Because that's where the conversation was happening. That's where I was meeting and connecting with artists and people. But it was so fascinating to watch as NFTs became a commercial enterprise, how that algorithm shifted what it was pushing to me, to make me feel these feelings of FOMO, to make me, feel like I was missing out, that I had to consume something in order to like be or stay relevant.
Sure.
And that bothers me, and it really is just like, for me, reminiscent of 2017 ICO bubble, more talk.
Mm.
And I mean, do you have an idea on where we begin to build like better algorithms and information finding, and something that has more of like machine empathy?
Uh, I would not place my bet on machine empathy. I would place my bet on just removing the layers of abstraction between people and between the way they connect and stuff. I mean, and that can be as simple as just like the way in which the UI of Twitter is structured is, and the way that certain things will be brought to the top, even if it's subtle, will completely change the entire tenor of that discourse. It completely, really kind of invalidates all of it, honestly. I mean, the thing is, like, any platform is okay. So a platform comes along and it has a better algorithm that like people like TikTok, people like more, or something else. Like once it learns you, you get only like stuff that's fun. That's just not changing the problem. That's just making you slightly happier for like a moment until then that you get bored and the next platform comes along or whatever. It's more that we are offloading social responsibility or social interaction, or just like we're automating what used to be organic social dynamics to a black box that, again, does not have like our best interest in mind. And you could say like, okay, I'm going to create a venture that has human best interest in mind. Like, the Asimov's like rules, like the discourse has to be positive, it has to be good for humans, whatever. Like, I guess you could try and engineer that. I don't know if we're even near that, but I would, even then, that's a layer of abstraction. Like, everybody is so isolated and removed from anything that would create, like, the essential thing that in my mind we need to be moving towards is, cooperatively owned horizontalist things, union based things, like, working class power to try to start to counterbalance the corporate power. I don't see any platform. I mean, maybe, yeah, some like lefty platform comes through and like that's where everybody goes. But even then, you're buoyed by the same forces. So I see some value in this kind of weird distributed Web3 world where everybody has their own platform. You can hop along. I mean, so with Channel, I mean, I believe this is a large part of what their plan and product is that, for example, it's like 3 different podcast communities, and they're all joining on this group, and I believe that a fair amount, or like all of, or whatever, a certain amount of their subscriber base is tokenized, or it's on the chain one way or another. And so that, for some of their members who have been shadow banned or kicked off of platforms that they need to promote their podcast, these like anti-capitalist, anti-platform, or at least platform critical podcasts, that tanks their ability to actually promote it. So putting it on chain or whatever, having it be outside of Facebook servers, allows them to transfer their audience to a new platform, for example. So things that untether us from being based completely on these existing platforms are exciting, especially if there are a million of them. If it's back to closer to like a website model where it's not just one consolidated thing, but that needs to be like a whole social movement to deconsolidate and break up all of these, like these huge oligopolical, whatever, megacorps, functionally,
Yeah,
is how I
yeah.
see it.
Did you, all of this conversation reminds me, did you see Midnight Gospel?
Yeah, that was the one where they animated the podcast interviews.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was nice.
I thought that was super fascinating in the way that, they created a captivating visual, high color, like high intensity, a lot of motion, but, you, but the information that was being fed was like incredibly powerful. And I think that is an interesting hack to be able to get people to engage. And I see, deeper, similar possibilities in very intentionally stepping into worlds, listening to panel type discussions, listening to more long form things in which people can, be together, interact, see each other, be responsive. And that kind of small niche, the stitching of those small niche communities within that world building is promising to me still.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, yeah, I mean, and certainly if the end result is forming, it goes somewhere. If it has somewhere to go, like that, I mean, that's so much. That's such ends up being a problem with movements these days. Is that because there's no like infrastructural place for like all that momentum and energy to go. It's just like goes onto Twitter and people are just like doing petitions. But if it's like something they can join and start participating in, helping fund and start like activating in. I mean, it doesn't have to. I mean, I'm always, even as much of a virtual artist as I am, I always default on like it should be people in person at some point to make it real. But like, as long, if I could see a good use case of metaversey stuff being well, again, that would have to detach it from my definition of metaverse as being inherently corporate, but like this Web3 spatial virtual whatever, just like online communities, if they have somewhere to go and then there's like an established agenda and it's organized and is working towards a goal, not just socializing, not just social critique. Because I will say, this is slightly an aside, but I have recently been seeing a lot of ostensibly leftist radical communities, as soon as like somebody comes along trying to actually do something and it's not the absolute perfect version of how they would do it in their head, they become insanely critical and I realize like, oh, they're not in it to accomplish anything. We've all been trained by these platforms to just be critics, be cultural commentators, to do a little like roast on Twitter, get our little dopamine from like having a good take, and then the world continues going south. And that's not to say that like any of us have that much control over our lives or actual any way to change things, but having a place for a community to go proactively, more than just socializing and sharing interests and like recipes and shit, I think is essential if it's going to actually accomplish anything more than just like hanging out.
Yeah, I mean, these megacorps have been so good at just training us into these feedback loops where we are just like automatically there. And then we ask ourselves maybe if we ask ourselves, why are we here? What are we doing? How has this like dictated and controlled my life? Like time is just running away. And here I am doom scrolling for whatever it is.
Well, I mean, that's usually is all that's available to you. It's like, what else are you gonna do? It's like it's okay. I'm gonna like doom watch on Netflix, or I'm gonna doom scroll on Twitter. So I mean, and it's less fun. It's less like of a dopamine hit, and people are less likely to hop onto things that are like, okay, it feels like work. Like, okay, we're building a social movement. Like, like I'd rather just play Halo. And like I don't blame people for feeling that way, because at no time in their lives have they seen anything like that actually be worth it. It just collapses or becomes infighting or whatever. But so it's kind of just it's like trying and waiting for the right moment where enough people get on the same page to defer that immediate pleasure response or immediate monetary response or immediate entertainment response for just a moment to work towards something larger and intentionally institutional.
These are deep questions.
Yeah. I mean, I just make animations. Like I'm no scholar, but that's what I see.
It was nice to meet you. Yeah.
Likewise.
Good first introduction. We've got just a couple minutes, so any parting words? Let people know where to find you. I'm really grateful, appreciative for the conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm on Instagram. It's at sam.rolfes and my brother Andy.rolfes and team.rolfes. And we're on Twitter and stuff like that, whatever. But yeah, our first like original stage show performance with Lil Mariko will be debuting in June. I think it's like the second or third. I'll have to see. Soft Center, Carriage Works, Vivid Festival, that stack of festivals in Sydney. And then we'll probably be touring around. We'll also probably be doing some performances at Zero Space in New York. We're going to be helping flesh out like the programming here from an artistic angle. So we'll be look forward to some stuff there. There should be like a Refraction DAO thing. And I don't know. I babbled plenty about my feelings about the metaverse and crypto and all that. But I would just emphasize to everybody that as exciting as the tech is, it by itself will not emancipate us from the current situation. It really has to be grounded in a social movement, and that takes other stuff and other skills. And I'm interested in building that with people and contributing. So anyway, happy to talk with whoever's into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think these conversations have been shaping up to be a dose of realism in an otherwise like totally hyped and out of control market.
It's crazy. Yeah,
so
that's very useful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I very much appreciate your honesty, your opinions and thoughts. Thank you really for making the time. I'm gonna get us out of here. I'm Colborn Bell with Museum of Crypto Art. We're with artist, designer, world builder Sam Rolfes. Thank you again to Minty and everybody for producing these conversations.
Breaking news.